to get started to talk about great women in history is to reach in our own backyard because she's not in everybody's backyard, right? But she is known as the queen of gospel music. Y'all, please welcome to the podcast of Faithfully Speaking, Mama Shirley, Pastor Shirley Caesar.
Well, she about to do a lawsuit, $5 million lawsuit for those who misused it. And rumor has it that it's because the profanity, people twerking.
By this shall all men know that we're his disciples, because we have loved one toward the other. And he did not say whether they were part of the LGBT or...
At 86, Shirley Caesar is breaking her silence on the whispers that have followed her for decades. The sexuality rumors that refuse to fade.
We love the LGBT community. We love everybody.
I do.
And we're not going to be pulled into anything that's going to drive us away from our agenda and our purpose.
But those weren't the only controversies. She's faced false death reports, lawsuits over her music, and even backlash for her beliefs.
And of course, there's a rumor that's going around that says I'm dead and buried, unless I'm a living dead person.
Still, behind the noise is a gospel legend from Durham, North Carolina, who rose from church pews to 11 Grammys, 18 Dove Awards, and an unshakable legacy. Now, the First Lady of Gospel is ready to confront the stories that tried to define her.
You may be mistaken. Let's
Really?
see. Because I remember singing my first song when I was like 5.
Shirley Ann Caesar was born on October 13th, 1938, in Durham, North Carolina. The city, known for its tobacco factories and bustling black neighborhoods, was also a place where gospel music thrived inside small wooden churches. For Shirley, gospel wasn't just music, it was part of her upbringing. Her father, James Caesar, was a local gospel singer who often filled their modest home with songs of faith. Sadly, he died when Shirley was just 7 years old. His passing left the family struggling, both financially and emotionally. Her mother, Hannah, was left to raise 12 children on her own. Out of those children, Shirley was one of the youngest, and she quickly learned the weight of hardship.
Well, I'm one of 13 children.
Okay.
12 of them are in the presence of the Lord. I'm the last one. As a child, I traveled and sang with Leroy Johnson.
But even in the middle of loss and poverty, music called her. As a little girl, Shirley would stand in front of church congregations and sing her heart out. Neighbors and elders often said she sang with the conviction of someone far older. That strength in her voice began to set her apart.
Neither one of us did what we were supposed to do. And Mama gave both of us a whipping. And that whipping, that particular one, caused the people in the community to hear about us singing because...
By the time she was a teenager, Shirley had already built a small reputation in Durham's church community. People knew the young girl with the booming voice who never seemed nervous in front of a crowd. At age 12, she recorded her first song, I'd Rather Have Jesus, which hinted at the career ahead of her.
As a recording artist in 1951, approximately in October, and if I'm not mistaken, you were 13 years old.
Her mother, though proud, was cautious. Hannah Caesar wanted her daughter to finish school and have stability, but Shirley's path was already clear. She wasn't meant to stay in Durham. She had bigger stages waiting. At the age of 18, her chance arrived. She heard that the Caravans, one of the top gospel groups of the 1950s, were looking for singers. Led by Albertina Walker, the group was a powerhouse, known for producing legends. Shirley auditioned, and with her commanding stage presence, she won a spot.
For 1 month later, Albertina Walker would go into the studio with Leonard Allen under State Records and record those first sides with the Caravans under her leadership.
Leaving Durham wasn't easy, but it was necessary. She had grown up in a house filled with grief and financial struggles, and now she was stepping into the professional world of gospel. With the Caravans, Shirley would travel the country, performing in churches, theaters, and auditoriums, often to packed crowds hungry for the kind of spirit-filled music only they could deliver. This early chapter of her life was about more than music. It was about survival. She had taken the sorrow of losing her father and turned it into fuel. She had taken the struggles of her mother's household and used them as motivation. And she carried with her the determination that no matter the challenges, her voice would be heard. By the time the 1950s ended, Shirley Caesar had gone from a poor girl in Durham to a rising star in gospel. Her roots shaped her, her struggles molded her, and her faith carried her. This foundation would be the bedrock of everything to come: the fame, the accolades, the controversies, and eventually, the moment at 86 when she chose to finally address the rumors that had long surrounded her. When Shirley Caesar joined the Caravans in the mid-1950s, she stepped into a group that was already legendary. Led by the great Albertina Walker, the Caravans were a training ground for gospel's finest voices. Singers like James Cleveland, Dorothy Norwood, and Inez Andrews had all passed through. Now, a young Shirley Caesar was about to add her name to that list.
11 years later, in 1962, the very song that you was featured with, Sister Thelma Bumpton, Sweeping Through the City, you recorded with the Caravans.
At first, Shirley was the quiet newcomer. She was still in her teens, wide-eyed at the sight of packed churches and theaters filled with fans who came to hear the powerhouse harmonies of the Caravans. But it didn't take long for her to stand out. Her strong, emotional delivery and commanding presence on stage made audiences take notice. When she sang, it wasn't just notes, it was conviction. People said she could preach a sermon in a song. One of her first standout performances with the group was Sweeping Through the City. Her ability to blend raw emotion with technical skill set her apart from other singers. Albertina Walker, known as the Queen of Gospel, quickly recognized Shirley's potential. Walker gave her space to shine, often allowing her to lead songs or take the spotlight during concerts.
Tina treated me like I was her own daughter. I celebrate her tonight. I ain't gonna let no devil come up in here and steal her night.
Touring with the Caravans was no small task. They traveled by bus from city to city, performing almost every night. The pay was modest, but the experience was priceless. Shirley learned discipline, stagecraft, and the art of connecting with an audience. More importantly, she learned how to handle the pressures of being in the gospel spotlight.
Met them in Washington, D.C. They rehearsed me on Friday, and Friday night I said, I can sing, I'm willing to wait too. I'll sing whatever you want me to sing.
The 1950s and 1960s were also a time when gospel music was crossing into new territories. Record labels were beginning to see its commercial value, and the Caravans were among the groups recording albums that reached wider audiences. Shirley's voice became a central feature on many of those records, helping to spread her name far beyond Durham and the South. But even as she grew within the Caravans, Shirley felt a tug toward something more personal. She respected Albertina Walker deeply, but she also wanted to step into her own identity as a solo artist. She knew she had the strength and drive to carry a career by herself. In 1966, after nearly a decade with the Caravans, Shirley made the bold decision to leave the group. It wasn't without risk. Going solo meant carrying all the responsibility herself. But Shirley was confident that her voice, her faith, and her determination would sustain her.
When I left the Caravans, it wasn't easy because when I didn't have a musician, didn't have anything, just me.
That move marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. With the Caravans, she had sharpened her talent, gained national recognition, and learned the business of gospel. Alone, she would face new challenges, but also find greater opportunities. The years with the Caravans weren't just about singing, they were about preparation. Shirley Caesar had been trained by the best, tested by the road, and embraced by audiences nationwide. Now she was ready to become more than a group member. She was ready to become the First Lady of Gospel. Leaving the Caravans in 1966 was the turning point in Shirley Caesar's career. She had already proven herself as one of the standout voices of gospel, but now she was stepping into the unknown, determined to carve her own path. It wasn't just about singing anymore. It was about leadership, vision, and taking the risks that came with being a solo artist. Her first years as a solo act were filled with recording sessions, small concerts, and church appearances. She released albums that showcased her unique style, blending traditional gospel roots with her fiery stage presence. Songs like No Charge became household staples in gospel homes. Her voice wasn't just singing, it was storytelling, pulling audiences into the message behind the music.
When you add it all up, the real cost of my love.
But Shirley Caesar wasn't just aiming for church audiences. Her energy and delivery had the power to captivate anyone, regardless of faith. Soon, doors opened outside the usual gospel circuit. She began receiving invitations to perform on television programs, introducing gospel to broader audiences who might never step into a Sunday service.
To all of our young people, by virtue of the fact that's what the United Negro College Fund is about. That is opening doors and making ways for young people to go to school.
One of her most memorable moments came when she was invited to the White House. Singing for presidents was a recognition not only of her talent, but also of gospel music's growing cultural importance. She performed for leaders such as Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan, representing the genre with pride and dignity. For Shirley, it wasn't about politics, it was about bringing her gift to the world stage.
Please give it up for Pastor Shirley Caesar.
The 1970s and 1980s cemented her reputation. By this time, Shirley was known everywhere as the First Lady of Gospel. The title reflected her dominance in the genre and the respect she commanded among her peers. Her concerts were packed, her records sold widely, and her reputation stretched across the United States and abroad. She also mastered the art of connecting deeply with live audiences. Her performances were more than concerts, they were experiences. People would laugh, cry, clap, and shout as she took them on a journey with her songs. This ability to hold a crowd gave her crossover appeal, even in spaces where gospel wasn't the main draw. As the years went by, Shirley's name began appearing alongside gospel legends like Mahalia Jackson in discussions of the genre's greatest voices. While Mahalia had been a pioneer, Shirley represented the new generation of gospel powerhouses who could hold their own on any stage. Her crossover wasn't about leaving gospel behind, it was about elevating it. She brought gospel into living rooms through TV, onto radio stations across the country, and onto stages that gospel singers had rarely occupied. Whether singing for a church revival or a televised special, Shirley Caesar made sure her voice and gospel itself was impossible to ignore.
But I don't have that time tonight.
By the late 1980s, Shirley Caesar had become more than just a gospel star. She was a cultural figure, an artist whose impact stretched beyond the walls of the church. But with fame came challenges, and soon her life would be tested in ways that went far beyond the music. The controversies and rumors that followed her name would eventually grow too loud to ignore, leading, decades later, to public remarks she made at 86, her way of breaking the silence. No career that lasts more than 6 decades comes without shadows, and Shirley Caesar's was no exception. Behind the awards, concerts, and gospel anthems, a string of controversies and rumors followed her for years. Whispers that grew so loud she could no longer ignore them.
Just help me to get this message around to let everybody know that I am alive and well.
Then there was her very public feud with fellow gospel singer Kim Burrell. The two had once shared stages and mutual respect, but disagreements over comments and performances created tension that spilled into the media.
Video went viral of Pastor Kim Burrell ministering on the gay lifestyle. The LGBT community saw it. They were hurt by it.
At the center were issues of doctrine, personal beliefs, and how gospel singers carried themselves in the public eye. But Pastor Shirley Caesar had a different take. Burrell should have made her comments years ago.
Another video went viral, but this time of the Queen of Gospel, Pastor Shirley Caesar.
Actually, what I was saying, Bishop, is why now? Why break up your life now to be bothered with something like that?
After the video surfaced of Burrell saying gay people are perverted in spirit, Ellen DeGeneres canceled Burrell's invitation to appear on Ellen's show alongside Pharrell Williams, with whom Burrell collaborated on the Hidden Figures soundtrack song, I See a Victory. Accusations of homophobia also trailed her. In an era when social issues were increasingly in the spotlight, critics claimed Shirley's sermons and comments reflected outdated or intolerant views. Whether fair or exaggerated, these accusations hurt her public image and sparked debates about how traditional gospel figures should engage with modern audiences.
My beautiful husband right there. He took us under his proverbial and...
Another set of rumors centered around church finances. Because Shirley was both a singer and a pastor, questions were raised about how money flowed between her ministry and her music career. Critics accused her of misusing church funds, while supporters insisted these claims were baseless attacks fueled by jealousy. The truth was never clearly proven, but the controversy lingered, feeding the narrative that Shirley's success came with complications behind the scenes. One of the biggest public disputes in Shirley Caesar's later career came in 2016, not from her church, but from the internet, after her sermon-turned-song, Hold My Mule, went viral as part of the hashtag YouNameIt Challenge, a remix by DJ Swede spread across social media, paired with images of alcohol and twerking dance clips that Caesar felt were inappropriate for a gospel message.
Greens, potatoes, tomatoes, lamb, pork, beans.
Outraged, she and her team moved to block the video and filed a $5 million lawsuit, arguing that the unauthorized use damaged her reputation as a pastor and gospel icon. The case made headlines nationwide, sparking debate about ownership, respect, and the clash between church tradition and internet culture. For an artist known for timeless, uplifting music, seeing her name tied to a multi-million-dollar courtroom battle was unexpected and jarring. And then came the personal whispers, not about men, but about women. Over the years, rumors surfaced questioning Shirley Caesar's sexuality, with gossip columns and blogs speculating about supposed lesbian relationships. None of these claims were ever backed by evidence, yet the chatter persisted in some corners of the internet and church circles. For a woman celebrated as the First Lady of Gospel, such rumors stood in sharp contrast to the holy image she projected on stage. Shirley herself chose not to dignify the speculation with public responses, letting her ministry and music speak louder than the noise. For decades, these controversies and rumors existed like a shadow behind her bright stage lights. Fans would defend her fiercely, pointing to her decades of service and ministry. Critics would say the smoke suggested fire. Shirley herself kept her focus on performing and pastoring, even as the questions followed her from stage to stage. By the time she turned 86, the weight of those whispers had built up to a point where people wanted clarity. And for the first time, Shirley Caesar herself decided to speak openly about the rumors that had shadowed her career. That moment would shake gospel circles and remind the world that even icons carry burdens behind their songs. Even with controversies swirling around her name, Shirley Caesar's achievements in gospel music and community service never slowed down. Her career stretched across decades, and the recognition she received placed her among the most decorated gospel singers in history. By the late 1980s and 1990s, Shirley was a household name, not just in church communities, but across the music world. Her songs continued topping gospel charts, and she became one of the most awarded singers in the genre. Over the years, she collected 12 Grammy Awards, more than a dozen Stellar Awards, and multiple Dove Awards. Each award wasn't just a trophy, it was a reminder that her voice still mattered in a changing industry.
I honor God first. I want to give him the glory because I know that if it had not been for him, I would not be here tonight.
One of the biggest hits of her later career came in 1980 with Hold My Mule. The song wasn't just popular in churches, it later resurfaced decades later when a viral internet clip called You Name It turned her preaching from that song into a global meme. Suddenly, a younger generation who had never sat through one of her sermons was quoting Shirley Caesar online. The clip spread across social media, proving that even in her 70s, Shirley's influence could break into the mainstream in ways no one expected. But Shirley's legacy wasn't built on music alone. She poured much of her energy into community outreach. Through her ministry, she launched programs aimed at helping the poor, providing food for the hungry, and offering scholarships to young people who couldn't afford education. In Raleigh, North Carolina, her church became not just a place of worship, but a center of support for those in need. Her outreach also expanded into broader public service. Shirley was often called upon to sing at major events, from presidential inaugurations to national celebrations, where she represented both gospel music and the African American church tradition. Each performance carried her reputation further, showing that gospel was not limited to Sunday mornings. It could stand proudly on the world stage. Even as she grew older, Shirley refused to slow down. She kept touring, recording, and pastoring well into her 70s and 80s. Fans would often remark on how she never seemed to lose her energy. On stage, she could still deliver the kind of soul-shaking performance that left audiences standing and applauding.
My music, my gospel, has changed a little bit because I know that I cannot continue to just sing, Satan, we're going to tear your kingdom down, the old songs.
By this time, younger gospel artists had begun to look at Shirley as a mentor and an icon. Singers like Yolanda Adams, Kirk Franklin, and Tasha Cobbs Leonard often credited her as one of the voices that paved the way. Shirley was respected not just for her talent, but for her consistency, decade after decade of making gospel her life's work. Through all the awards, outreach, and performances, Shirley Caesar never strayed far from her roots. She remained committed to her community, her church, and her music. But as her 86th birthday approached, the decades of whispers and questions lingered in the background. People wanted to know, would she ever address the controversies that had shadowed her? The answer came in a way no one expected. She broke her silence. When people look back at gospel music over the last 70 years, Shirley Caesar's name is always near the top. What makes her stand out is not just how long she has been around, but how much she gave to the music and to her audiences. From the moment she started recording with the Caravans in the late 1950s to her solo career that took off in the 1970s, Caesar kept raising the standard. By the time she reached her late 80s, the world already called her the First Lady of Gospel. Her awards prove her impact. Caesar has won more than a dozen Grammy Awards, beginning with her first in 1971 for Put Your Hand in the Hand of the Man from Galilee. She kept collecting Grammys across different decades, showing she was never just a singer of one era. Along with Grammys, she received over a dozen Stellar Awards and Dove Awards, honors given to the very best in gospel and Christian music. In 2000, she was inducted into the Gospel Music Hall of Fame, a recognition that put her in the company of legends.
If anyone would have ever told me that I would have a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, here I am, a little chocolate girl from North Carolina.
But Caesar's legacy was not only about trophies. Her songs became cultural moments. A perfect example is the viral explosion of Hold My Mule in 2016, where the famous You Name It remix spread across social media. Millions who may not have known her career suddenly heard her voice turned into a holiday anthem. Younger generations who had never bought a gospel album discovered Shirley Caesar that way, proving her music could travel far beyond traditional church walls. Even leaders outside of music recognized her influence. Presidents and mayors invited her to sing at national events, including services in Washington, D.C., where her voice carried a sense of both faith and history. In 2016, she received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, an achievement rare for gospel singers, and a signal of her crossover cultural importance. Caesar's legacy is also tied to her church work. She did not stop preaching even while traveling for concerts. In Raleigh, North Carolina, her church remained her anchor, and she poured energy into community service. Feeding programs, scholarships, and outreach projects were part of her regular activity. That combination of music and ministry made her stand apart from performers who stayed only on stage. Today, when fans talk about Shirley Caesar at 86, they see more than a singer. They see a woman who carried gospel into the mainstream without leaving behind the church roots. They remember her as someone who worked beside giants like Albertina Walker and the Caravans, stood strong as a solo star, and gave sermons wrapped inside her songs. Even now, she is honored at tribute shows, award ceremonies, and church conventions where her name is spoken with respect. Shirley Caesar's story ends where it began, with gospel music at the center. After decades of work, she is remembered not just for songs, but for the way she lifted people through them. Her legacy is secure as one of the greatest gospel singers in history.